Hi, this is Maggie from Design Code Debug Repeat. Welcome to the channel and to our 15th video in the Introductory R series. In several prior videos, we've talked about the tidyverse and what tidy data is. I'll link the first tidyverse video here. In this video, we're going to talk about ggplot 2, a tidyverse package that facilitates quickly creating complex visualizations of data that is in tidy format. Let's dive in. Creating visualizations is one of the most satisfying aspects of data analytics because you can quickly and pretty easily create a visual summary of your data, which can give you a more intuitive sense of its shape and other properties. You've probably read that the GG in ggplot stands for Grammar of Graphics. The beauty of ggplot 2 is that all of the plots follow the same grammar or structure, and so you don't have to learn a lot of different functions to create different kinds of plots. Let's create a plot with our AI data. Recall that our AI data is the amount spent in different industries on AI in the years 2017 through 2021, and there are also totals for each year. We'll look at one category of spending over all 5 years. An appropriate representation of that data would be a column chart. A column chart is a good way to compare single numbers. I have some code here to create a new table of just the cybersecurity spending. The table is called AI Cyber, and you can see it here. There are 5 observations. They're all for the entity cybersecurity data protection, and we have the year and invest variables. We'd like the invest variable to be what is shown as the height of the column, or y-axis, and the year variable to be along the bottom of the plot, or x-axis. Now I have loaded in the tidyverse, which gives me access to ggplot. I'm going to type ggplot, open parentheses, and then I'm going to put AI Cyber, close parentheses. So ggplot, and then the first argument is the data argument, which is the data we're going to be creating our plot from. The second argument is the mapping, which defines how we're going to map our data to our plot. So how is that data going to manifest visually? In the mapping, we select elements of the data and map them to visual components of the plot, such as axis, color, size, and shape. For this, we use the AES, short for aesthetics, function. So after AI Cyber, put a comma and write AES, open paren, close paren. The aesthetics will go between the parentheses. There are a lot of different aesthetics you can define, or ways that the data should be represented visually in your plot. And that will partly depend on what type of plot you choose. For example, for a scatter plot, your points can have different shapes, so you can say which variable from your data should determine the shape of the points in your scatter plot. But that aesthetic does not make sense for a column chart because there are no points in a column chart. In RStudio, I'm going to choose cheat sheets from the help menu and then data visualization with ggplot 2. Because this is a really useful cheat sheet. On the first page, we can see a list of geomes, the different kinds of plots we can make. And for each geome, it lists the aesthetics. Those are the arguments you can put in AES. We'll refer back to this several times. Let's start with a very basic column chart and the X and Y aesthetic, mapping which data goes on the x-axis and which data is represented by the height of the columns. I already know I want the year column to be X, we want one column for each year of spending, and I want the invest column to be Y. The amount spent will be represented by the height of a column. Now that I've specified that, I can add layers to the plot, and we do this with a plus sign, and then the layer we want to add. So first we're going to want to add some kind of geome layer, at least one, which is the kind of plot. I'm going to write geome call. Let's look at that first, so we'll execute that. And over on the right in the plots area, we see a column chart. The x-axis label is year. The tick labels on the x-axis are the years 2017 through 2021. The y-axis label is invest. And there are gray bars of different heights representing the number of dollars spent on cyber for that year. Let's create the labels on this that we want. That's going to be another layer that we add. So after plus geom call, we'll put plus labs. And let's ask for help on labs in the console so we can see what the options are. The first argument is an ellipsis. And it says a list of name-value pairs. The name should be an aesthetic. So I can include X and Y here because those are aesthetics in my plot. And I can also have a title, subtitle, etc. Let's put inside the parentheses after labs, title equals spending on AI cybersecurity by year, comma, X equals year, which is no different from what we have, but just to illustrate how to control that, and Y equals investment USD. Right now, it says the name of the column, invest. And we'll run that. And now we can see our chosen labels on our plot. So that is a simple, serviceable plot. I won't say it's particularly attractive, but it conveys information. One thing that's kind of fun with ggplot is the themes. We can apply a theme to that and immediately make it look more appealing. On the second page of the cheat sheet, we can see some themes. Let's add a theme. Let's try plus theme underscore. And then you can see some options come up for me. Notice that some are in ggplot2 and some come from GG themes. You can import themes. Let's use theme economist. That's from GG themes. If you want this theme, you can install GG themes just as you installed the tidyverse, and then the themes will be available. And that isn't much different, but the blue background and white grid lines give us a nice contrast and interest. Now, suppose I am interested in how the spending over time on cybersecurity compares to the average spending over time. I want to show you how to add another layer to this plot, one that uses a different aesthetic mapping. You can add another layer that uses the same aesthetic mapping. For example, I can add a geom line by simply writing plus geom line. And I'm going to put that after geom call, but you don't have to. I just like to have the geoms together. And if I run that, you can now see a line representing the change in spending. Let's create another table, which is a summary of the average spending. Remember, I'll have to remove the total rows from AI data to do that. You might pause the video and think of how to create that summary table, that's a hint, for a review. How'd you do? I'll write average over time, assign the value of AI data, pipe 2, filter, entity is not equal to total, pipe 2, group by year, pipe 2, summarize, average equals mean invest. Now, how do I add a layer to a ggplot that uses a different table for data? In our ggplot command, we specified first the data argument, then the mapping argument. That will apply to all of the layers unless we specify different values in a layer. Then what we specify for an individual layer will take precedence. So if we want to essentially override that data or mapping, we can specify data and a mapping inside the parentheses for the layer. This is an important principle. What's in the ggplot command is global, applies to all of the layers, unless we specify something in a layer. What we specify in a layer is local, applies only to that layer. So let's change our geom line to be a new geom line, the averages. I'll put inside geom line data equals average over time, mapping equals AES, X equals year, Y equals average. And so that overrides the original data set. And now we'll be using our summary table. and I'm specifying where X and Y will come from in this new data set. And when we run that, we can see the line is not representing the same data as the column chart. The trend is similar, but we can see there are other categories pulling that trend line away from the cyber spending column. It's not very easy to read, and there's no label associated with it though, so we need to make some changes. Let's look in our cheat sheet at the aesthetics for a line. We have, among others, color, line type, and size. Let's try color equals red and size equals 2. Now, where do we put that? These aren't aesthetics because we're not defining how data from the data frame will be mapped to the plot. So they don't go in aesthetics. We're going to put them after AES, inside the geom line parentheses. So after AES, comma, color equals red, comma, size equals 2. Well, that's visible. I'd like to make the points a little clearer, so I'm going to add points as well by adding another layer, geom point, and I'll put the same data and X and Y mapping, and I'll put size equals 3. I'm also going to change the labs so that the title is Spending on AI Cybersecurity by Year versus Average AI Spending. Maybe that's a little too long. If you have a better title, and I'll bet you do, please tell me in the comments. Now, we really need to add a legend to this so that it's clear that the columns are cyber AI spending and the line is the average AI spending. Adding a legend is not quite as straightforward as adding the labels. To add a legend, we're going to use scale fill manual. There are a number of scale functions, as you can see on the cheat sheet under scales. These allow you to pick your own values for different aesthetic mappings. So for example, you can pick your own colors for points, rather than using the default ggplot colors, and it will automatically add a legend. That's the part we want, the legend. So to do that, I'm going to associate labels with the fill aesthetic for our geom call and geom line. Lines don't even have a fill, but I'm using the fill aesthetic because I think it makes the legend look nicer. So in geom call, I'll write AES fill equals invest with invest in quotes. That's a label. It isn't the column that's associated with fill. Okay, and I'll do the same thing in geom line, which is our average. I'm going to add in AES fill equals AVG, again in quotes, because that's a label. And then at the end, I'm going to add scale fill manual, open paren, name equals legend, labels equals C average AI cybersecurity AI, values equals C, AVG equals red, invest equals gray. In the values, I'm associating the label with the color. And we'll run that. And notice that the fill of the columns does change to a lighter gray. That's the gray fill. So this has allowed me to manually set that fill color. And the legend has the labels I gave it, average, AI, and cybersecurity AI, and the title or name legend. And the colors are nice little squares. That's why I chose scale fill manual, because that gives us squares in the legend. And now, because I'm feeling picky, I'd rather have the legend on the right. So I'm going to add one more thing, theme legend.position equals right. You can define a whole theme using theme. Here I just want to use it to move the legend, but you can control a lot of visual components of your plot with theme. Let's review quickly. Start with ggplot, and then add layers. You will need to specify your data and how the data maps aesthetically to the plot. If you want to have global data and aesthetic mappings that apply to all or most of your plot, put it in ggplot. If you want to have local data and aesthetic mappings that apply to a single layer of your plot, put them in the layer as arguments to the layer. You're going to need to have at least one geom. That's the type of chart, such as line, column, scatter, etc. And then there are a lot of things you can do to control the way your plot looks, such as adding themes, labels, and using the scale functions to manually alter aesthetics, such as colors, and add a legend. One final note, you can store your plot object in a variable and then act on the variable to add to the plot, rather than putting the whole command in your script, as I've done here. So, for example, I could have written SIBE versus average is assigned the value of ggplot AI cyber AES x equals year y equals invest. And then I could write SIBE versus average plus geom line, or SIBE versus average plus geom col. So I can define my base plot and then try adding different things to it, or just build the whole thing up one step at a time by adding to the plot object. Okay, so that's an introduction to ggplot. You are going to want to play around with this a lot because creating plots is integral to data analytics. You will want to know the different kinds of plots, obviously, which are appropriate for what kinds of data, and how to clean them up so they communicate well. I've included an auto-graded exercise that you can download from my GitHub repository, along with all of the code from this video. The links are in the description of this video, along with some free book recommendations. Have fun with it.